Chapter 5 of Manners from Heaven, A Divine Guide to Good Behavior by Quentin with John Hofsess, published 1984. Chapter 5, Advanced Crisperanto. Opening quotation. Manners are of more importance than laws. Manners are what vex or soothe, corrupt or purify, exalt or debase, barbarize or refine us by a constant, steady, uniform, insensible operation, like that of the air we breathe in. Edmund Burke, Letters on a Regicide, Peace. Some people are born fault-finders. Of the whole man they seek only the Achilles' heel. The difference between a well-mannered person, who chooses not to react to every human foible he encounters, and someone who can't keep a bitchy temperament under control, is not that the former is unobservant, but that he has achieved a certain measure of inner calm. He doesn't feel compelled to build himself up by tearing others down. To be constantly on the lookout for real or imaginary slights by other people, or shortcomings in them, predisposes one to bad manners. Even if one resists commenting upon whatever flaws one spies in others, one is not going to enjoy the company of people privately regarded as fools. A well-mannered person does indeed see the gaps of others. Anyone who makes a concerted effort to become conscious of the ramification of his manners is bound to be conscious of all that goes on around him. But instead of making others feel bad by making reproving remarks, he discreetly avoids being victimized by their misbehavior. Such a maneuver falls under the heading of defensive manners. You see trouble coming, and you cross the street, as it were, so that you may continue on your way, whistling a happy tune. By contrast, a person with a bitchy streak is always on the prowl for sarcastic opportunities, his ego thriving on the discomfort of others. What makes the fault-finder so compulsive about uncovering defects in others is that he is striving to reduce everything and everybody to the same level of mediocrity that he accepts for himself. The well-mannered person ardently wants social relations to run smoothly. His actions and words are designed to bring out the best in people. But the perverse fault-finder doesn't want people to behave better than he does. Most of his words and actions are designed to bring out the worst in people, creating a maximum of confusion and misunderstanding. The basic measure of defensive manners is, weed your social garden. The world is full of people, and there is no reason to endure those who are more trouble than they are worth. Instead of surrounding yourself with tiresome people, be they bores or bores, keep the revolving door revolving. Nearly all of the people who write in to Miss Manners in her syndicated column do so because they wish to complain about someone's rude behavior and want advice on how to rebuke him. It's a waste of time. Don't try to change your guests' behavior. If they aren't up to scratch, don't ask them back. Life is too short to be spent in a constant struggle, separating the good from the bad. There is barely enough time to separate the excellent from the merely good. Another general rule: cultivate as large a vocabulary as possible. The well-mannered person requires a great store of tactful expressions. We should upgrade our conversational skills in order to increase our choice of what to say, so that people will get our meaning without our having to insult them. Instead of being stuck with calling large people fat, we can now say they are imposing or Juno-esque. Instead of describing someone as skinny, we can say slim, slender, or sylph-like. This is a common practice on a rudimentary level, for most people maintain two sets of adjectives: an alkaline list for those present, and an acidic list for absentees. Those who are absent can be called greedy. Those at the table have hearty appetites. Those absent are opinionated. Those present know their own minds. Absentees are tyrannical, present company are born leaders, and so on. Euphemisms have a bad reputation among the young, the wild, and the free, and others who delight in kneecapping people with their philosophical hammers. But to say indirectly what you mean, so that your message is unmistakable, but your delivery gives no offense, is one of the most subtle arts that the human mind can devise. Euphemisms are not, as many young people think, useless verbiage for that which can and should be said bluntly. They are like secret agents on a delicate mission. They must airily pass by a stinking mess with barely so much as a nod of the head, make their point of constructive criticism, and continue on in calm forbearance. Euphemisms are unpleasant truths wearing diplomatic cologne. We must not use our vocabularies, however, to make people feel uncomfortable, or simply to show that we have spent hours in studying a dictionary, or in my case, doing crossword puzzles. If I were to use the word avaricious, and I sensed that the person I was talking to was not familiar with the word, I might add greedy about money, as if I were amplifying my own thoughts rather than explaining the word to him. Although one tries to address the world with as much intelligence and finesse as possible, one tries to eliminate any trace of condescension in one's speech. Much of what constitutes the mild errors of manners among certain people is based on the assumption, never baldly stated, that somehow he or she is special and thus beyond the rules. For instance, you get someone on the telephone saying, "Hey, how you doing?" without identifying who he is, because he expects to be recognized, and who, when asked for his identity, may even say, "Well, who do you think it is?" This is coy and absurd. Such informalities are simply inefficiencies, and should be treated as such. The problems that one encounters on an occasional basis in hosting a soirée are nothing compared to the domestic discords that can occur when two or more people are sharing a residence. Even at the most gloomy party one can console oneself by saying, "This too shall pass," and be reasonably sure it will end before sunrise, when all the vampires creep back into their crypts. But with spouses, in-laws, flatmates, and all those who the more disruptive of your life their behavior becomes, the more often they tell you they love you. What kind of an excuse is that? It is no easy matter to extricate oneself from a trying situation. I do not allow this problem to arise in my own life. I have not lived with anyone since reaching my mid-30s, and have not had the remotest wish to be seen by someone else eating my morning corned beef hash and eggs with a scraggly beard and my hair in curlers. I would rather move to the third world and be crushingly poor and alone in a rice paddy than be pent up in a penthouse with some professional cellmate who insists on being my soulmate. I don't want to sing the nearness of you to anyone, but judging from the expanding list of shared accommodations classifieds in the papers, the bulk of humanity is lining up, for reasons of economics or debauchery, to live in communal beehives, where the days are filled with a socializing buzz, and the nights are rendered sleepless by snoring and other nocturnal emissions. For those who don't have enough sense to live alone, a few guidelines from the sidelines may help. Clarity of communication, coupled with tact, is an invaluable tool in preventing misunderstandings from occurring in any social situation. But it is crucial when two or more people share a dwelling together. Flatmates can help preserve a sense of privacy and breathing space by informing one another on a regular basis what their schedule is likely to be, so that when one is staying in, the other may plan to go out. That way, their residence is used with maximum efficiency. Clear, consistent arrangements about the occasional sharing of food and supplies are also helpful. One tries whenever possible to reduce the everyday domestic details to a dependable formula, considerate to all, agreed upon by all, and requiring little further discussion. This may seem elementary, but in my experience, which comes largely from observing the mistakes of others, many people find it difficult to share in the running of a peaceable kingdom. No sooner has one individual agreed, in apparently sound mind and good spirits, to perform a certain function for the well-being of the household, than he wants to change it. By the third week or so, he forgets the function altogether, and by the fourth is complaining about being taken for granted. So you are back to square one again, trying to define who will do what and when. The younger your flatmates are, the sloppier they are likely to be. The older they are, the more eccentric and brittle they are likely to be. Without people, our lives may seem to be an arid waste, but with them the desert suddenly becomes a minefield. The man or woman who is an amusing delight to meet once a month for a meal and a movie may turn out to be an irascible neurotic with a drinking problem upon moving in. Few people look their best in extreme close-up. Matters can get worse. If your flatmate brings home guests, you may well find that in addition to having less privacy, you also end up having less of everything else. Food, liquor, soap, shampoo, anything that is not locked up. It is, of course, the responsibility of a housemate to give his guests a towel and face cloth, so that they won't use yours, and to point out to them what shelves in the medicine cabinet hold your property, and so on. But if you get stuck sharing with someone of extreme casualness, and then, even worse, hit with their guests whose manners are non-existent, everything you own will be subject to erosion and petty larceny. Since you are presumably sharing a place for economic reasons, this slow, steady eroding of whatever you buy will be a constant irritation. For every glass of juice, every inch of toothpaste is a further pinch in your own tight budget. With reasonable people, remedial action is never far from hand, but what makes cohabitation so problematic is that most people are not reasonable. They are far more likely to see your faults than their own. This tendency is aggravated if, by further mischance, the place you are sharing belongs to them. If two people take an apartment together, they may later decide that they are not getting on and bring the arrangement to an end. But at least they will be obliged to treat one another as equals, and they are likely to try to make their domestic arrangement work. If the place you are sharing, however, is the property of the other person, you are likely to be regarded, in stressful moments, as an interloper with minimal rights, and are likely to be treated arbitrarily in any disagreement. In the early stages of sharing accommodation, you can try to solve your problems through discussion. Beyond that, you must employ defensive manners, and begin avoiding your flatmate as much as possible, and protecting your property from the petty pilferage of his guests. This policy is only a stopgap measure, for it is likely to cost more than you planned or can afford to eat your meals out or go away for weekends in order to preserve your sanity. As these extra costs mount, the whole point of sharing a place to save money will become blunted and worn down to pointlessness. Thus exhausted and exasperated, you will have to begin again looking for a place to lay your weary head alone. Man is basically a modest animal who sometimes behaves immodestly. The current era is a period of such derangement. All bodily functions are unpleasant, and, for the most part, we are aware of this. By mutual consent, and in compliance with the law, most physical functions are performed out of sight of others. Only a minimum of politeness is required when you live with someone with whom you are in basic agreement. Something more is needed for those to whose opinions and actions you find yourself opposed. And when you have settled in with someone thoroughly incompatible, you must avail yourself of all the courtesy of which your vocabulary is capable. The well of togetherness contains a multitude of micro-parasites that you will never find in the well of loneliness. If one is constantly frustrated and defeated by the social environment in which one lives, good manners will remain an abstract subject rather than an embodied idea. John Keats once wrote, "That which is creative must first create itself." So it is with manners. We must first of all seek out those people and situations most conducive to bringing out the best in us. Then, when we have become calm and strong in our manners, we can take our models of behavior out into the wider, ruder world for an airing, a challenge, even an occasional beating. Time and again throughout our lives, we will follow this tidal pattern of renewal and return, for always the object is to encourage good manners in others through example, rather than through censorious nagging, and when wearied of that tiresome process, to recuperate alone in pleasant surroundings. Thank you for listening.